This is the FSU School of Theater training tutorial on the table saws. So what we have here is the SawStop table saw. It has a cartridge braking system which will detect if you come in contact with the blade. It will shut down the tool and drop the blade assembly into the housing of the tool to prevent you from getting injured. So while this is a very safe tool, we're still going to talk about a lot of safety with regards to table saws, because you may not have one of these table saws all the time. So it's important to keep in mind that this feature is here for this tool, but not necessarily on all tools. So the first thing that we have is a blade guard. Do not remove your blade guard. Use your blade guard. Have it there as much as you can. There are some cutting operations you cannot use a blade guard for, but for most of them you should have the blade guard in place. This is a very good blade guard. It has independent operating sides, which means if you tilt it, it will still function normally. This has a limit rod, which will limit the size of the material you can send through so that it's still being able to be cut by the saw blade. Remember, when you set the height of your saw blade, make sure that the blade clears out of the material completely. The gullet, which is the recessed portion of the blade, should also be cleared of the material. So set your blade appropriately. On the back side of the tool are these little arms that come down. These are anti-kickback pawls. There's 4 of them. 2 of them can be set out of the way. Make sure those are in place for most operations. There are a couple you won't want them for. And this is the ribbing knife. There's a separate one if you need to do an operation that you can't use all of this assembly for. But that's to help split the material and keep it split so it doesn't bind and try and kick back. From the fence to the blade, this area is considered trapped material. You want to make sure that you push the trapped material with even pressure, tight to the table, tight to the fence, all the way clear of the cutting area. So it should pass through and be completely cut past the blade area where it gets cut. On this side is waste material. While it's still a good idea to push on this, you may get more comfortable on this side and make sure that you control the trapped material. This has the greatest tendency for kickback. Now, with adjustments to the blade, you can change the height with this knob. You can change the angle with this wheel. So this is the wheel for height, this is the wheel for angle. If you change the angle, the blade is going to pitch this way. While you can move the fence to this side of the blade, do not have the fence on this side of the blade with the angle tilted toward it. That creates a tighter trapped material with a greater tendency for kickback. If you want to cut an angle, keep the fence on the right side of the blade. Other features: when you move the fence, there's an indicator on this side that will tell you the size of the material you're ripping, or the size of rip you're going to end up with. And on the top of the fence, we keep a push stick. So as you're going along, you find you need the push stick, go ahead and put that behind the material, push it all the way through, keep your hands free and clear of the danger area. Also available to you is an auxiliary fence. This adds 6 inches. It simply locks into place, and then you can move it to where you want. Now you can get a much smaller rip using this auxiliary push stick. Push the material through, still keeping your hands well clear of the table saw blade. So very safe for you to operate that way. There are other accessories like feather boards that are magnetic that can attach to the table. There is miter gauge if you're doing a different kind of cut where you're cross-cutting the material. One thing that is not allowed on this table saw is freehand cutting. So if you drew a line on a piece of material and you line that up and you're feeding it through without the use of the fence, that practice is not allowed. You may also need to change the saw blade at some point, because we use our combination blades for cutting plywoods and other made material. So if you need to change the saw blade, make sure that power is off. This switch needs to be off. This controls power to the tool. This switch, once this is run through all of its checks and the cartridge is working properly, you can then turn it on with the paddle. That way you can turn it off with your knee if you need to while you're mid-cut, something goes wrong, you can keep your hands on the material and turn it off with your knee. But if you're changing the blade, make sure power is off to the tool. So now we've got the throat plate out. Simply lift up on that bar and it comes right out. And there's a handle on the back here so that you can remove the ribbing knife and the assembly. Wrenches are kept toward the front. One wrench on this side, and one wrench on the nut. Once you have it loose, go ahead and switch to a cupped position for your hand and loosen the nut off so that it falls into your hand and doesn't fall into the table saw. Change out the blade. If the blade is still good, it can go with the other good blades, either the rip blades or the combination blades. If the blade needs to be sharpened, there's a separate area for sending tools to be, or sending blades to be sharpened. Once you have your new blade on, put your assembly back together. And when you're putting the throat plate back in, note that there are a couple of mushroom-shaped pieces here and in there, and they have to slide together. Otherwise, the piece is going to stand up. The throat plate's going to stand up in the back. It won't give you a good cut. Once everything is in place, all the features are down, you're good to go. Make sure that the table saw outfeed tables are clear. Those are just for the table saw use. They should not be used for anything else. Nobody should be working projects. If you are making repeat cuts and you are staying with the tool, you can keep your repeat cuts as storage here. Never leave an unattended tool running. This tool can remain running, but if you are operating this tool, you need to be in this control area. Once you leave this control area, you must turn it off. So don't leave an unattended tool running. This has been the safety operations of the table saw for the FSU School of Theater Scene Shop.